Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto become a vampire ninja in Hellsing world. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. The vampire ninja, two boys, both the same yet so different, one born in love and family, one born in hatred and loneliness, stood facing each other in a narrow valley. Come back to Konoha, Sasuke, barked one, a short blonde in a tattered orange jumpsuit. The other one, a raven-haired boy in a blue shirt and white shorts, just held out his hand and gathered lightning into it before charging at the boy. The blonde replied by gathering a swirling orb of energy. Chidori. Rasengan. They clashed in mid-air and the valley erupted in light. Ceres sat on the roof of the Hellsing Manor thinking of the last mission she had just returned from. She had been sent to eliminate a rogue vampire. But when she and her master, the vampire Alucard, got there, all they met were ghouls and a priest from the Vatican who had quickly incapacitated her. Her master had engaged the priest only to get beheaded and come back alive after telling her to drink his blood, to which she refused. Ceres sighed in sadness. Why did she have to drink the blood? If she did, would she become blood-crazed like her master? She was interrupted by a flash of light coming from the forest. What was that? She shouted and ran to find out. Following the source of the light, she ran into a clearing where she saw a horrid sight. A kid lay naked in the middle of the field, bloody and bruised. Inching closer, she saw that he was blonde with 6 whisker marks on each cheek. Kneeling down, she got a huge whiff of his blood that seemed to make her mouth water. Shaking her head to gain control herself, she looked for any other wounds, finding a nasty hole on his chest, next to his heart. "I failed," he whispered, shocking Ceres, who quickly got an idea. "What? Oh, never mind. Do you want to live?" she asked. The boy nodded. "Are you sure? What I'm about to do will bind you to my will. Your old life will be over," she asked again, to which the boy nodded. Leaning down, she bit into his collarbone. The boy opened his eyes and let out a scream of pain, before fainting. Pulling back, Ceres picked up her new fledgling and ran to the mansion, where Integra stood waiting along with Alucard, Walter, and some other men. "Police girl, what's going on?" demanded her master. "I found this boy in the forest and saved him," she said. "You turned him?" Integra demanded. Ceres nodded. "And what, pray tell me, were the extent of his injuries?" "Multiple stab wounds, a hole in his chest, and multiple bruises," she explained. Integra nodded and ushered her in. When they were in, they immediately put the boy on a medical bed and carted him down to Ceres's room. There they discussed what to do. "If he poses a threat, he will be immediately destroyed," ordered Integra, to which Ceres nodded. "When he awakes, he will serve Hellsing and you will give him all the instruction needed. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Naruto awoke in a dark room filled with fancy furniture. Looking around, he only thought one thing. Where the fuck was he? Getting out of bed, he went to grab his clothes only to find them gone. Suddenly the door opened and in came a man in his 80s wearing a white shirt with a brown jacket, carrying a tray. The man noticed Naruto and smiled. "Ah, you're awake, I see. Good. I'll go fetch Sir Integra and the others." "Who are you?" came Naruto's reply. "Where are my clothes?" "I am Walter C. Dorna's butler and servant to the Hellsing family. I've taken the liberty to retrieve some new clothes for you since you were found in the nude," Walter explained, producing a pair of black trousers and white shirt. "What?" Naruto screamed with a blush before quickly putting on the offered clothing. After he got them on, he was led upstairs to a large office where a woman that almost looked like Tsunade except younger, brighter hair, and had glasses, sat behind a large brown desk with the woman from last night and a man in a charcoal suit, leather riding boots, a red cravat, and a long red duster. "So you're the boy Ceres turned?" asked the Tsunade lookalike. "I'm Integra Winget's Hellsing. The woman who saved you is Ceres Victoria and this is Alucard. I am Naruto Uzumaki, ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village," he greeted. Integra raised an eyebrow. "An assassin?" she asked wearily. Naruto nodded. "When we're hired to do that, otherwise we protect convoys, merchants, princesses, but that's usually chunin level missions. Genins like me have to pull weeds and do chores unless we get the higher level missions," he said before going into a whole explanation of his life. By the end, Integra was rubbing her temples in frustration. "So let me get this straight. You are a low-level ninja who was transported here to an obviously other world when you somehow created a portal during your fight with your traitor of a teammate?" she asked, to which Naruto nodded before asking, But what did you mean Seers changed me? Well, Naruto, in this world there are creatures called vampires, who drink the blood of other living beings. When you were found you were fatally injured, so in order to save you Ceres had to turn you into a vampire. Now you are being forced to fight as a vampire for Hellsing doing what we do. Killing bad vampires. Excuse me. I need some time alone. With that he left. Ceres looked at the door with a worried expression. Do you think he'll be okay? She asked. Integra sighed in exhaustion. I don't know, go check on him if you are so worried, she said. Ceres nodded and ran off in pursuit of her fledgling. With Integra was getting Naruto's sleeping arrangements set up when she was suddenly hit by Naruto's aura. Her eyes widened and she suddenly felt her heart tear in two. That aura, she whispered. Walter nodded. The aura of a pure soul suffering, he said in sadness. Alucard couldn't help but agree. With Ceres has finally caught up with Naruto to find him curled up crying like mad while whispering, I failed, I'm a monster. I'm alone. Ceres walked over to him and wrapped him in a hug. Vampires may be monsters, but you can still prove you're not one by doing good here. You don't have to be alone me, she said softly as she stood him up. Naruto sniffled and looked up at her with bloodshot eyes. Really? He asked. Ceres nodded and smiled. Thank you, master. He whispered before running to catch up only to realize something. Why walk when you could ride a summon? Master. Come here please. He shouted. Ceres reappeared. What is it? She asked in an annoyed tone. A grin formed on his face as he drew some blood and go through hand signs, summoning jutsu. I wouldn't put him in a separate room, said Alucard. They were currently discussing Naruto's sleeping arrangements. Why? Asked Integra. Let's just say, if I know the police girl, you might want to prepare a wedding ceremony, explained Alucard. Any other conversation was cut off by a loud scream. The trio looked out the window to see a massive toad in a vest sitting there with two certain blondes on its head. Integra sighed. Whatever this was, it would mean a lot of paperwork. Naruto smiled as he helped Ceres off Gamabunta. It was just too funny to listen to her scream. Looking at the frog boss, he smiled. Thanks, Boss Toad. Nice to see you. Could you tell Ero-sensei that I'm alive? He asked. The giant frog smiled. Of course, Squirt. I'll try to see if I can get him to come here and train ya. Can't have my summoners weak now, can I? The toad laughed and disappeared. Naruto looked at Ceres, who immediately smacked him on the back of the head. Ow! What the fuck? He yelled only to get hit in the head again. Don't curse, Ceres yelled. Come on, I'm sure Integra wants to finish the previous conversation. She finished as she dragged a pouting Naruto inside. Once they returned to the office, Naruto was scared stiff. Integra and Ceres were looking at him in frustration while Alucard was staring at him hungrily. What the hell was that? Shouted Integra. Naruto looked at her sheepishly. That was Gamabunta, the boss of the Toad Summons, he said. What use are frogs? Asked Alucard. Naruto fumed. This guy had audacity to question the Toad's power and call them frogs. They can spit oil to cause giant flaming tornadoes, squash your opponents, and they have Sage Mode. The Toads are awesome, he exclaimed in excitement. Integra sighed. Who is Ero-sensei? She asked. Just then there was a poof of smoke and a white-haired man in a red jacket, fishnet shirt, and horned helmet popped in the room. The man looked around till he saw Naruto. Naruto. There you are, what's going on? Never mind, come on, we're going home. He yelled until he saw Ceres. A perverted smile came on his face. And who are you, my lovely? He asked. Ceres gave him a fake smile. Ceres Victoria, vampire and master of Uzumaki here. She introduced. You are? Oh no, now you've done it, whispered Naruto. Who am I? Asked Jiraiya before beginning a weird dance. I am the hermit of Mount Myoboku, the great toad sage. Jiraiya of the Sennin. At the end of his exclamation, confetti shot out from behind him, making everyone sweat drop and think, what an idiot. After he finished, Jiraiya faced Naruto. Enough dilly-dallying, Naruto, come on. Tsunade's worried sick, he ordered as he attempted to take Naruto away. I can't, I died, screamed Naruto. Jiraiya just kept going. No you didn't. You're obviously alive and kicking, he shouted only to be tackled by Ceres. You get your perverted hands off my fledgling. He belongs to Hellsing, she shouted. Jiraiya growled. Look toots, Naruto's coming with me where it's safe. He isn't anyone's property. He's coming home with me so I can finish his training, he shouted. Integra scowled. Naruto is a vampire now. He falls under my jurisdiction. He is a danger to all he's around. He's staying here, she shouted. Jiraiya stood there in shock. He knew what a vampire was, but Naruto couldn't be one, could he? He looked to Naruto. Is this true? He asked. Naruto looked down in sadness. Yes, my master saved me after I was transported here. Without her, I would have died. I am now a vampire, but I'm still the same awesome guy from before, he answered with a smile. Jiraiya nodded in affirmation. Fine, I'll train you from here. He relented, but he is also a ninja, so if he is needed for a big mission then we will call for him, he finished. Integra nodded in agreement. Very well, since you will be training Naruto you will get a spare bedroom, but now it is getting late and I would like to turn in for the night, she said. Walter escorted Jiraiya to his room. Walter bowed and the two men left the room. Sir, what about Naruto? Asked Ceres. Integra smirked. He'll be sharing a room with you, she said happily, making both blondes blush. Ceres nodded. Grabbing his hand she dragged him down to the lower levels. Coming to the door to her room she pushed it open, revealing a rather large room filled with old-looking furniture. In the middle of the room was a large coffin. Naruto looked around the room in confusion. Where's the beds? He asked. Ceres pointed to the coffin. We sleep in these to keep up our strength when we don't drink blood, she explained, ignoring his cries of protest to examine the room. Why is there only one coffin, she thought. Because it's only appropriate for a fiancé to sleep with his other, said a voice. Spinning around she saw Alucard standing there looking at her with a smirk. She nodded when she realized what he said. What? She screamed in shock while Naruto didn't look fazed. Alucard nodded. Yep, when a female vampire turns a human, she chooses him to be her mate. When you turned him you were basically married in vampire terms. I approve of him, he said. What if I refuse him? She asked, making Naruto look down in sadness. No one wanted him. Alucard grinned. He would try to gain your favor, he said, and if that wasn't enough he would kill himself. Ceres looked at Naruto as he looked down. Do you really not like me? He asked. Do you hate me? Am I not worthy of master's affection? He asked in worry. Ceres immediately shook her head. No, it's not that. It's just, you're so young. I'm sure you have a girlfriend at home, or aren't interested in girls yet. You're a great kid, kind, gentle, fun, energetic, honest, and lively. I could tell by your blood. You're just so young. She comforted him, but truly she actually wanted to be with him. She was drawn to him. But he was 12. No, I have no one. Everyone would rather be dead than be with me, but you chose me. I really thought you chose me. Am I just a toy, or a slave? He shouted in agony. No, I just don't want it to be like this. I just feel so wrong. She cried. Alucard sighed. Ceres, when you chose him at unconscious, you will live forever. Take him, he's yours now. Take responsibility, he ordered her before phasing through the wall. Ceres looked at her fledgling and wrapped him in a hug. I'm sorry, I'll be with you always. I'm so confused by all this. I'm still new to this. Please forgive me? She asked. Naruto sniffed and nodded. Ceres smiled and together they climbed into the coffin. Naruto sat his head on Ceres's chest and smiled. Thank you for accepting me, master. Just wait until tomorrow. I'll show you how strong I am, he exclaimed happily. Ceres smiled. Yeah, but it'll have to wait. Sunlight is fatal to us, she explained. Naruto pouted, but that will give me time to teach you what I know so far, and to get you your weapons. The next day, Naruto, Ceres, Alucard, Jiraiya, and Walter sat in Ceres's room talking. They had decided to give Naruto a katana while making all his kunai and shuriken silver when there was a loud explosions and gunshots. What's going on? Asked Jiraiya. Suddenly the phone rang and Walter picked it up. After a while he put it back down and turned to them. It seems that the estate is under attack. Jan Valentine was having a blast. He was walked down the halls of the Hellsing mansion, killing all the men in the way of him and his ghoul army. Suddenly an old man appeared from a doorway on the left and walked toward them. The geezer swung his arm and the sword glinted for a second. Suddenly 3 ghouls erupted in blood before falling into 3 pieces. Oh dear, I missed. Oh well. My name is Walter Dornez, butler to the Hellsing family and ex-vampire hunter, said the old man. Jan just stood there before laughing. That's just fucking great. Plowing through you pansies was starting to fucking bore me. he yelled, snapping his fingers, making the front two lines of ghouls to move in front of him. Walter's eyes widened. "Oh my. Naruto, would you mind?" he said, and suddenly a blonde appeared out of nowhere carrying a sword and some sort of knife. Naruto charged forward, cutting down two of the ghouls before twisting to stab another in the head. Suddenly he jumped, dodging a hail of bullets. Flipping in the air, he landed atop one's head before driving the kunai into the creature's head, causing him to lose balance as the creature fell to the ground. Rolling with the fall, he stopped amidst a group. Spinning in a circle, he cut them down, spraying blood everywhere. Suddenly he was shot in the leg. Screaming in pain, Naruto fell to the ground, clutching the wound, while he could hear the other two desperately try to save him, but they couldn't stop the ghouls from descending upon him. Closing his eyes, he awaited the pain of being ripped apart. Mindscape Naruto appeared in a familiar sewer tunnel knee-deep in water. Walking down the tunnel, he came to a massive room with a large cage with a small piece of paper labeled "Seal" placed on the gates. Looking in the gates, thinking he would see Kyuubi standing there glaring at him, only to see the demon fading in a corner and its aura being absorbed into his chakra system. "Kyuubi, what's going on?" he yelled. "When you were transformed, it caused the seal to absorb me faster. This is the end for me," it yelled in anger as it tried desperately to break through its prison bars, only to not even make them budge like how he used to. Giving up, it settled for giving its container one last glare. "Goodbye, Naruto. May we meet in hell, where I will kill you once and for all." It finished before vanishing forever. Pain enveloped Naruto as he absorbed the last of Kyuubi's chakra. Real-world Jan Valentine was laughing as he opened the door to the conference room, only to be met with a bunch of old guys pointing guns at him. They were about to shoot when suddenly the room was filled with an unholy scream of pain that seemed to be coming from Naruto's direction. Everyone looked towards the boy, only to see him standing there screaming as red energy covered his body. Soon the energy disappeared, revealing a taller Naruto with 9 red furry foxtails along with 2 fox ears atop his head. Naruto looked around the battlefield before laying his eyes on Jan. "You," he yelled, pointing a clawed finger at him. "You have attacked my home, my mate, and my friends without mercy. For that I will show none. Prepare to face the wrath of Naruto Uzumaki." He finished with a growl before picking up his katana and charging. Jumping into the air, Naruto slashed the katana downward, cutting off Jan's arm. Spinning around on the ball of his foot, Naruto kicked Jan in the face, sending the vampire flying into a wall. "Shit. What are you? Fuck this, die!" Jan screamed before firing his weapons at Naruto. Naruto smirked and disappeared. Jan looked around the room, searching for the blonde. "Looking for me?" he heard behind him. Suddenly he was thrown into the wall and stabbed in the gut. Jan screamed as Naruto twisted the blade. "Yes. Scream. Scream for me. Bleed? Ah ha ha ha." Naruto laughed as he listened to Jan's screams of pain. That's when more ghouls decided to show up. Naruto smiled and sent his tails at them, watching in glee as they ripped the ghouls apart. Ceres was shocked. This wasn't Naruto. He wasn't cruel or insane. She wanted her Naruto back. Running forwards, she grabbed his arm and held it back. "Naruto, stop this. Please. Don't leave me. I want the old Naruto back. You're not a monster. Please come back to me. Please." She screamed the last part. Naruto looked at her. "Master?" he asked shakily. Ceres nodded. "Yes. Naruto, come back. Master calls. Master wants her Naruto. You hear me? I want my Naruto back," she cried. Naruto grabbed his head and groaned. Master, what happened?" he asked. That's when he saw the dead ghouls. His eyes widened and teared up. "Oh God, what have I done?" he whispered in horror before falling to his knees. Ceres softly whispered comforting words into his ear as she held him to her breast. Integra watched this happen with sadness, that a youngster would become like that. Gathering her wits, she turned to the fallen Jan. "You, who do you work for?" she demanded. Jan smirked. Why not? I'll give a hint, since I'm dead anyway," he exclaimed. Suddenly he erupted into flames. "Beware Millennium." With that he disappeared in flames. "What happened here?" came the voice of Alucard as he appeared in a puff of smoke along with Jiraiya, who looked worse for wear. Jiraiya noticed Naruto's appearance. "Naruto transformed, it seems. Good, it'll make things easier," he said in a relieved tone when he was suddenly thrown against the wall by Ceres. "What happened to him?" she demanded. "What's wrong with him?" "Nothing. assured Jiraiya, waving his hands in front of him. He's just absorbed the Kyuubi, he said. Everyone who knew of Naruto's burden. What? What does that mean? Demanded Sir Island's senior. Integra sighed. The boy once held a great demon in his gut, but now he has absorbed the beast and taken its power. She explained. She smiled. It seems that in this dark moment a light has been found. Jiraiya nodded. The next day there was a funeral for all those who had died. Out of the many soldiers only 10 had survived: Alucard, Ceres, Integra, Naruto, Walter, and 5 soldiers that had fought with Jiraiya. Naruto stood next to Ceres as they watched their dead comrades be buried. Naruto looked down in sadness. Why did they have to die? He whispered, first the old man, then the soldiers he was supposed to fight side by side with. Ceres placed a hand on his shoulder just as Jiraiya came walking up to them. Naruto. Naruto looked up at his sensei. Yes. Integra wants you in her office right away, he said. Naruto nodded and they all walked away towards Integra's office. Sir Integra, you wanted to see us? Asked Naruto. Integra looked up from her paperwork and motioned for them to take a seat in the 3 chairs before her. Doing as asked, Naruto took a seat next to Ceres. What's this all about, Ba-chan? He asked. Walter growled and Jiraiya laughed. Relax, Walter-san, that's his way of showing respect and that he sees her as a precious person, he explained. Integra shook her head. She had no idea what Naruto had just called her, but she didn't really care now, so she cleared her throat, gaining their attention once again. Now that I have your attention, I have some news, she said in a calm tone. What is it? Asked Ceres. It seems that the members of the Round Table Conference didn't like the fact that I had a new unknown entity from the other world working for me. They convinced the queen to order Naruto to pledge allegiance to the crown in the form of a knighting, she said. So we all need to be there? Asked Alucard. Integra nodded and Ceres squealed in delight. That means that I can take Naruto shopping, she shouted, and Naruto groaned. Integra sighed. Ceres could be so blind. No, it means that they're trying to get him to pledge allegiance to England, not Hellsing. That way he would be under their power, thus gaining incentive to get rid of us, she told her. Luckily me and the queen have something planned for them. They all nodded. What should we get him to wear? Asked Walter. Integra smirked. A suit of armor, to signify our plan. Ceres sighed as she stood before the doors of the palace. You ready? She asked the cloaked stranger next to her. The stranger didn't answer but opted to open the doors and walk in where the Hellsing soldiers, Integra, the conference members, Walter, Jiraiya, and Alucard sat in chairs arranged on either side of a long aisle. Everyone turned towards them as they made their way down the aisle towards the altar where an elderly lady sat in a large throne with. So you are the new member of Hellsing, the so-called demon. Come here, my boy, let me see you, she asked. Naruto complied and walked up to her before kneeling before her. He felt her hands grasp both cheeks as she examined him. Ah, you are unlike what I've been told. You are obviously a kind child, yet have suffered much, a terrible childhood, she said. Tell me, where is it your purpose in life? To protect my loved ones, my comrades and humanity, he said confidently. The lady smiled. I've heard that you are of another world. Is this true? She asked. Naruto nodded. I see. Have you ever taken in life? Only those who are evil and corrupt. What does that entail? They who take from the needy, the innocent, the weak, those who ruin all others' lives to satisfy their own desires, rapists, traitors, he explained. The queen nodded. Then do you, Naruto Uzumaki, pledge under the penalty of death, to protect this country as a knight in the service of the England and her territories? I will, he answered in a sincere voice. The queen smiled. Then I pronounce you Sir Naruto Uzumaki, champion of Hellsing, she said. Shed the cloak and show your true colors, she ordered. Naruto smiled and threw back the cloak, revealing silver chain mail under a plated chest piece, brown leather gloves and a helmet that's front had a winged cross carved into it. Naruto has his tails out and waving in all their splendor. The men of Hellsing burst into applause and cheered. Naruto turned and walked to be with his friends. How was that? He asked in a hushed whisper as the queen went into a speech on how everyone had to work together to keep their homes safe. Integra smirked as she glanced at the conference members' struggle crunch sneer as they had just lost a large chance in gaining enough power to not need the Hellsing organization. Superb, little one, she said with a smirk. Naruto and Ceres were taking a stroll in the forest surrounding the Hellsing with Ceres hanging on his arm. He smirked as he looked up at the taller woman. "Hey, do you want to go on a ride with me?" he asked. Ceres looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. He smirked before stepping away from her. Suddenly he was engulfed in flames. "Naruto." "No," she screamed, only for the flames to disappear, revealing a massive nine-tailed fox with wild unkempt orange fur, making it seem like its body was made of flames. The fox stared at her and smirked. "What do y'all think?" it asked in a deep rumbling voice. Ceres stared at the fox in shock. "Naruto?" she asked cautiously. The fox nodded. "It's me, so you want to or not?" he asked. Ceres nervously climbed atop his back and wrapped her arms around his neck. Naruto pulled back his lips in what seemed to be a grin. "Hold on tight," he shouted before shooting into the shadows. Ceres held on tightly as everything became a blur as Naruto ran through the trees. Suddenly they stopped atop an open hill. Naruto transformed back into his human form. "How was it?" he asked in happiness. Ceres whacked him. "Don't do that again," she barked. Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly. "Hey, sorry, just wanted to come here to relax and look at the stars," he said as he laid down in the grass. Looking up at her, he patted the spot next to him. Ceres smiled at her fledgling mate and joined him. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he asked. Ceres nodded as she watched the millions of stars in the sky. "I used to climb up to my roof or climb to the top of the Hokage monument after particularly hard days and stare up at the sky. I like to think that the stars were, or are, my parents watching over me. I knows it seems weird, but it helped me during childhood," he explained. "How was your childhood?" she asked. Naruto frowned. "In one word, horrible. I was kicked out of the orphanage at 4 and beaten every day, 10 times worse on my birthdays," he said. Ceres's eyes widened. "Why didn't you kill them or leave?" she asked. "Didn't you hate them for doing that to you?" "At first I did hate everyone, but I found some people who cared and began wanting to be Hokage," he explained, and Ceres smiled. "It was a good thing," she said softly, leaning in closer to him. "I'm glad you're you, Naruto. It makes you all the more likable," she confessed. "I love you too," he said and moved in to kiss her. Suddenly they were separated by a long blade. "So you are Hellsing's new pet? I'm a bit disappointed, I must admit," called a familiar voice. Ceres looked up and saw a man in a dark coat with a cross necklace. There before them was the paladin himself, Alexander Anderson. Naruto growled, "Who the fuck are you?" Anderson grinned evilly. "I am an instrument of God. I am the messenger of the divine punishment if hell," he chanted while moving 2 blades to form a cross. "I bring on to thee his mighty justice and shall send thee to the deepest pits of hell." He finished before charging. Naruto smirked and sent a tail after Anderson, smashing it into the ground only for Anderson to dodge it and slice off the tip. Naruto screamed in pain and charged. Anderson smirked and swung upwards in an attempt to slice Naruto in half. Naruto moved to the left, allowing the weapons to pass harmlessly by before kicking the priest in the face. Anderson crashed into a tree hard enough to leave cracks in it. The priest looked up and smirked as the wounded tail had grown back, longer this time. "Incredible healing, monster," he complimented. "I'll enjoy killing you, then I'll kill the bitch over there before continuing on with that other vampire." Naruto smirked. Biting his thumb, he ran it across a seal on his arm, summoning up his katana before getting into a stance taught to him by Jiraiya. "I'll kill you before you get the chance," he said, swinging downward in an effort to cut off Anderson's arms only to miss. Naruto blocked a strike sent for his head before throwing the priest away and swinging his blade in an attempt to slice off the older monk's head. Anderson blocked only to be sent skidding back by the force of the impact. "What? How can you be so strong?" he cried. Not even Alucard had that much force in his blows. Naruto smirked. "I'm not a vampire, fool," he taunted, swiping at Anderson's legs. "I am something else. Something worse." Anderson growled before countering with a strike to Naruto's gut. The blade buried deep into Naruto's flesh and blood spurted out of the wound in his mouth. "It doesn't matter what you are. You serve the heretics, so you die," he yelled, bringing his blades into Naruto's chest. Ceres's eyes widened and tears filled her eyes. "Naruto!" she screamed in terror. Anderson watched Naruto bleed with a victorious smirk. With a sickening squelch he ripped the blades from Naruto's chest and turned to Sarah's. "Now that is over, it's her turn," he said in a happy voice. Sarah's growled and charged with her fist held up to smash into Anderson's face. Anderson easily dodged the strike and countered with an elbow to her gut. Sarah's grunted and reeled back. Anderson smirked and threw 3 of his blades at her, impaling her arms and legs, trapping her to the ground. He wiped some blood from his mouth as he walked towards her, much like a predator. "You've gotten stronger, too bad that it's for naught," he taunted. Anderson smirked and leaned forwards, moving his face so that it was inches away from hers. Sarah's looked up at her with a hate-filled glare and spat in his face. Anderson sneered and wiped the saliva from his face. "You'll pay for that, bitch," he growled, raising his blades to impale her heart. Sarah's closed her eyes and awaited her doom. "Hey you," they heard a familiar voice cry out. Anderson turned around just in to see Naruto slam a glowing ball of energy into his gut. "Rasengan!" Naruto cried, and Anderson was sent spinning into a tree, kicking up dust and wood chips. Naruto glared at the growing cloud of dust before turning to Sarah's. "You okay, master?" he asked in worry. Sarah's looked at him and saw the stab wounds already healed, leaving only tears in his armor and shirt. "Naruto!" she cried in happiness and struggled to embrace her fledgling. Naruto dropped to her side and placed a finger to her lips. "Do not speak, conserve your energy," he whispered as he began removing the blades pinning her limbs. Suddenly they heard laughing coming from behind them. Turning, they saw Anderson standing there with a big hole in his stomach that was quickly closing. "Sarah's, go get Integra and Alucard," he yelled. Sarah's nodded and ran into the forest. Naruto watched her disappear before looking at the priest. "Impressive move there, Nosferatu bastard, but that little trick won't help you," he yelled, summoning up a vertex of papers that shot a volley of knives that pinned the sheets of paper to the trees and ground all around the hill. The papers glowed, showing strange writing before dimming. Sarah's groaned as she felt her power lower, but Naruto smirked. "You think those flimsy sheets of paper work on me?" he yelled, charging forward while focusing chakra around his blade. "Demon blade technique. 10,000 strikes," he cried. Suddenly he disappeared in a blur. Anderson screamed as gashes formed on his chest and fell unconscious. Naruto reappeared above Anderson with his sword held above his head. "Die," he cried, sending the blade down. Clang. Naruto's eyes widened as a woman with black hair wearing the same cloths as Anderson appeared and blocked the strike. Naruto growled. "Who the hell are you?" he growled. The woman looked up. "Yumi Takagi," she said in a creepy voice before slashing at Naruto's head. Naruto growled. "Why to defend this man? He tried killing us for nothing." Yumi growled. "Shut up, demon. You don't deserve to have peace." Naruto snarled and formed the tiger hand seal. Wind release. Great breakthrough. He exhaled, sending a fierce cyclone of wind that crashed into the nun, throwing her into the trees. Yumi growled and charged, swinging towards Naruto's exposed side. Naruto parried the blow and they erupted into a sword battle, slashing and stabbing at each other, both trying to land a hit on the other until they finally jumped back. Yumi glared at Naruto in hatred yet admiration. No one had ever stood up to her in a straight-up sword fight. She growled and charged. Naruto smirked and focused chakra into his fist. He waited until she was in range before shoving the fist into her gut. Yumi screamed and fell to her knees. She looked up at Naruto hatefully. "Go on, do it, kill me. There'll be more," she yelled. Naruto shook his head. "No, killing you has no purpose," he said without emotion, turning away from her. Yumi stared at him before struggling to her feet. She limped towards Anderson's unconscious form, picked him up and disappeared. Naruto sat and waited for the others to appear. He didn't have to wait long, for 10 minutes later Integra showed up along with a battle-ready Sarah's, Walter, Alucard, and 10 of the wild geese mercs. Integra stepped forward. "Naruto, what happened? Where's Anderson?" she demanded. Naruto looked at her with a smile. "Fleeing," he said, shocking everyone. "You beat Anderson?" asked Walter with disbelief. Naruto nodded and began to recount the past events. By the end of his tale, everyone was staring at him in shock. Suddenly Alucard started laughing hysterically. "You must be truly strong, Uzumaki, a true maelstrom. We should spar sometime," he exclaimed. Naruto smirked. "Hell yeah, old man. Just you wait, I'll beat you to a bloody pulp," he boasted, and the two shared a grin. Sarah's watched the exchange with a smile. "Naruto, how can you be so strong?" How can you change people so much? She thought fondly. Integra saw this and smiled. The future is bright for Hellsing, she mused. All right everyone, since there isn't any other threats in the area we can go home, let's move out. Time skip. It had been 3 months since the incident with Anderson and Yumi, and things had been going well for Naruto and Hellsing. Jiraiya had visited often, bringing jutsu and news. Naruto was delighted to hear that Gaara had been promoted to Kazekage and wished to see him, so as a reward for hard work, and a way to extend the hands of friendship across worlds. Integra had set up a date for the trip to Naruto's world in 3 months' time, and the day had finally come. Ready guys? Called Jiraiya as he looked over the people coming. Ceres, Walter, himself, Naruto, Integra, Pip, and Alucard. They all nodded and grabbed onto each other. Jiraiya smirked and performed the jutsu. Smoke enveloped their V-zone and filled their noses. Naruto coughed and gagged, waving his hand in front of his nose before looking up, where he was greeted by the familiar sight of Konoha's gates. Nostalgia filled Naruto as they began their trek towards their gate. Oh man, I can't wait to get there. First things first, Ichiraku ramen, here I come, he shouted as they passed through the gates. Ceres shook her head in embarrassment. You can't eat human food, only blood, Naruto. She said in a stained tone. Naruto smiled at her. Nope. I can eat anything covered in blood, thanks to absorbing Kyuubi, he exclaimed. The two guards watched him with shock and happiness. Once they were gone, one turned to his partner. Naruto's alive. This is awesome, he shouted while his partner nodded. That's when they realized what he said. They looked at each other and fainted. Tsunade was busy at her desk and losing her battle with humanity's most feared foe, paperwork, when suddenly the door burst open, revealing a short blonde she hadn't seen in months. Ba-chan! Cried Naruto as he wrapped his arms around his mother figure. Tsunade smiled sweetly as she hugged the blonde in a tightly. It's good to see you too, Naruto, she said happily before noticing the group of people who had accompanied him. One of them stepped up and bowed. Greetings, Hokage-sama. I am Integra Winget's Hellsing, leader of the Hellsing organization. This is my retainer Walter, my servant Alucard, and Naruto's master Ceres Victoria. She greeted. Tsunade's eyes narrowed when they landed on Ceres. So you're the one that took Naruto from us, she said in a dangerous tone. Ceres nodded nervously. Tsunade stood up and walked to stand in front of her before staring into her eyes. Be careful of him. If he gets hurt, I will kill you, she threatened before turning to Naruto. Naruto, why don't you take Miss Ceres on a tour of the village? Take her to meet your friends, she offered. Naruto nodded with excitement. Grabbing her hand, he dragged her out of the office. Naruto stood flabbergasted at the large restaurant before him. Was this the place? He took a whiff. It certainly smelled like it. Cautiously he moved inside, where he saw a familiar woman working at the counter, where sat, to his surprise, the Konoha 12. Minus Sasuke. And their senseis. Motioning to Ceres to be quiet, he snuck into the shadows to listen in to their conversation. Oh, bad couldn't be here. He would have loved to see this place as it is, whined a blonde in a purple tank top as she ate her ramen. The fat boy next to her nodded. He was a good person, a good comrade. I miss him. He was a great ninja. He burned with the flames of youth. Weeped a boy with a bowl cut wearing a green jumpsuit hugging an older clone. A silver-haired man with one eye looked at them with bloodshot eyes. I know he was a great student. I should have paid more attention to him. But no matter how much I denied it, I had some resentment towards him. I wish I would have treated him better, he said in a dejected tone. A pink-haired girl patted his shoulder, allowing her tears to fall. Choji raised his drink glass to Naruto. He cried. They all raised their glasses and echoed his toast. Really, a toast? For me? Well, I am kinda dead, they heard a familiar voice say. They all turned and saw their blonde friend standing there with a big goofy smile. Naruto, they cried as they gazed upon their dead comrade in shock. Naruto smiled, showing off his elongated fangs. What's up, guys? Naruto, he heard a female cry before he was suddenly glomped by a certain lavender-eyed Hyuga and pink-haired girl. Ha, 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 it's good to see you too, Hinata, you too, Sakura, he said happily, giving them a quick hug. After she pulled away, a boy with a gray hoodie and red fang-like markings on his cheek walked up to him smiling. Dude, where have you been? He asked. That's when he noticed Ceres standing next to Naruto. Hello, who are you? he asked seductively. Sarah smirked and wrapped her arms around Naruto. Kiba looked at them before his eyes widened. Naruto, is she your girlfriend? He asked in fear. If he had just hit on Naruto's girlfriend, he would have to face Naruto, who seemed to be emitting an aura that screamed, Alpha. Naruto shook his head. Mate, he said, shocking everyone. Nani? I told you we cannot provide more ninja or allow Naruto to leave again. He is too valuable. Sighed Tsunade. Integra stared at Tsunade with a firm glare. Ever since Naruto and Sarah's had left, they had been discussing the alliance between their world and the village, and it wasn't going well. I understand, but Naruto is my soldier now, not yours. Naruto Uzumaki the ninja is dead, there is only Naruto the vampire. If you wish to deny me my soldier, my champion, I can just kill him. He hasn't drank any blood, so he will be easy to kill with the combined efforts of Sarah's and Alucard. She said nonchalantly. Tsunade slammed her hand on her desk. You wouldn't dare. She barked angrily. Integra nodded. I would. Even if this isn't my world, I still go by the mission of my family and organization. To search and destroy. As much as it hurts me, if he isn't allowed to be in Hellsing, I'll just have to kill him. Explained Integra. Tsunade looked down. Fine, you can have him, if he can stay a ninja. She amended. Integra agreed. Tora. She yelled, and a man in a tiger mask appeared in front of her. Yes, Hokage-sama? He asked. Tora, go get Naruto and his friend. She ordered. The man bowed and disappeared. 30 minutes later, Naruto walked in with a smile. Yoba-chan. What is it you want? He asked in a loud voice. Tsunade got a tick mark at getting called old. Damn it, Gaki, I'm not old. She yelled before settling down. We've decided to allow you to continue as a soldier of Hellsing and a ninja, but you will act as a liaison between us. She explained. What does that mean? He asked. You will be moving between worlds acting as a diplomat, clarified Integra, meaning as a representative you get a seat on both the Round Table Conference and the Shinobi Council. Naruto nodded. Is that all? He asked. Tsunade shook her head. No, I have something for you. She said, pulling out a green vest. Congratulations, Chunin Uzumaki. She said, happily tossing him the vest. Naruto took it with a surprised expression. Slowly he took off his chest piece and slid the vest on. Naruto raised an eyebrow when he noticed that it looked more like a bulletproof vest from Hellsing. It even had the Hellsing insignia on the left pocket and a leaf symbol on the right. Why does it look different from others? As a member of Hellsing and Konoha, you are expected to wear the coat of arms at all times while on duty. Explained Integra with a slight smile. Also, now that you're a Chunin, you can hear about your heritage, said Tsunade. Naruto's eye widened. He had always wanted to know about his family, and now he could finally be told. Naruto immediately sat down and stared at Tsunade with full attention. Tsunade sighed. Naruto, your mother was Kushina Uzumaki. She originated from Uzushiogakure, the ninja village in the land of whirlpools, that no longer exists. What happened? Asked Integra. Tsunade sighed. The ninja of Uzushiogakure were adept at fuinjutsu, or seals, and for that reason it was destroyed in the Second Shinobi World War. There were no survivors except Kushina and some others who have disappeared across the map. She said. Naruto looked down in sadness, but know that they did not give up. They fought to the last man, literally. It took 3 villages to take them down. At the end, only the Azukage was left standing, and he took out half of the army of 3,000 ninjas by himself. She said. Naruto smirked and puffed out his chest proudly. Alucard listened with interest and smiled. True men. He commented in admiration. Naruto nodded in agreement before turning to Tsunade. What about my father? He asked. Tsunade sighed and pointed to the wall where the portraits of the past Hokages, particularly the 4th. Naruto stared at the picture before his eyes widened. No, he thought, it couldn't be. Naruto looked at the Hokage as tears built up in his eyes. The F4th? He asked. Tsunade nodded sadly. Naruto looked down in sadness. The full truth had finally come out, after all the lies, tears, begging the old man to tell him about his parents. He finally knew of his father's betrayal. Tears fell from his eyes as he clenched his fists. Why? Why did the Yondaime seal such a demon inside his own son? He looked at Jiraiya with tearful eyes. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked. Jiraiya sighed. I couldn't. You weren't ready? Not ready? I was ready, you bastard. Do you know how many times I sat in bed after a beating crying because I had no parents? That they were gone? No one to care for me. All I ever really wanted back then was to know their names. He yelled, dropping to his knees in sadness. Sarah's looked at her mate as he cried before dropping next to him and wrapping the boy in a hug. Naruto leaned into her shoulder and burst into tears. The other occupants watched in sadness as they listened to his cries of agony. After a while, Naruto's crying died down to quiet sniffles until he finally went silent. Sarah's looked down to see the boy sleeping soundly with his head on her shoulder. She smiled sweetly before looking at Tsunade. Where are we staying? Is there a hotel? She asked. Tsunade smirked. There's a hotel around the corner. Tell them to assign you 3 of their best rooms. She told them, Integra, when you're ready please return and we can discuss the term of our alliance some more. Integra nodded and led the group out. Tsunade waited until they were gone before falling back into her chair with a heavy sigh. Why does everything that has to do with Naruto have to be so complicated? She thought with a sad look. He didn't turn against Konoha. With him gaining the Kyuubi's power, it could spell disaster for Konoha if he began attacking them. She let another sigh. Time could only tell, but for now she had work to do. She glared at the pile of paperwork on her desk, willing it burn. 2 hours later, Naruto awoke to a white ceiling with a large chandelier hanging from the center. He groaned and sat up to see that he was in a large queen-sized bed in a large red velvet room with some very fancy-looking furniture. Where am I? He wondered. What happened? I see that you're awake, Master Naruto. Naruto turned to see Walter standing watching him from the doorway dressed in standard Jonin cloths. Naruto smiled. Walter. Where are we? He asked. And why you dresses as a Jonin? Walter smirked. This is your and Miss Victoria's room in the hotel The Burning Rose. He explained, showing the Hellsing family crest on his back, along with a wire reel on his left hip. It seems that your Jonin uniforms caught my fancy and so I decided to try them on, with my own improvements. It also seems ninja wire is better than mine by a long shot. I'm quite excited to see how I fare with them. Is there any weapon specialists here? Naruto smiled. Yeah, I know someone you can talk to if you want to try training in weapons, he said. Walter's eyes shone with interest and excitement. Really, who? He asked. Naruto smirked. Tenten. You'll find her with her team at Training Ground 9. Make sure to get stronger, old man. We need you out there in the field. Walter chuckled. No, my field days are over. Nonsense. The third was probably, 20 years older than you, and he was still the best ninja in the village beside the Sannin. He complimented. Walter smiled. Thank you, Master Naruto. I will try to get stronger. In the meantime, Sarah's is waiting for you in the other room, he said in a grateful tone. Naruto nodded and got up to leave. Walking out into the suite's living room, he was greeted by Sarah's sitting on a dark red couch with her nose in a magazine while sipping a blood pack. Naruto smirked before disappearing into the shadows. Sarah's sat comfortably on the couch, engrossed in her book as she awaited Naruto's awakening. Suddenly, a pair of arms wrapped tightly around her. Guess who? Sarah's Chan. She heard her mate call. Sarah's smiled and patted the spot next to her. Naruto leapt over the couch and sat down. How are you doing? He asked. Sarah's smiled. He always thought of other people before himself. I'm fine. What about you? Are you okay considering what you just learned? She asked in worry. It wasn't every day that you learned that your father was the one that sealed a giant monster in your gut. Naruto frowned and looked at the floor. I'm good, it just hurts, you know? He said. I spent my whole life wondering who I was, who my parents were, and if they loved me. But to learn that the greatest man in the village's history, the man who condemned me to the life of a Jinchuriki, was my father, it hurt. He said in a low tone before sighing, but I've never been one to mope around about something and not take action. Sarah's nodded and kissed him on the cheek. I'm glad. She whispered. Naruto smiled at her. Do you want to go out? Since you're a full vampire and I'm part demon, we can go outside, right? He asked. Sarah's nodded. Naruto grinned. Then come on, I want to show you something. He yelled, taking her hand and running out the door before she could reply. 10 minutes later, she finally got him to let her go and was about to yell at him when she stopped when she realized where they were, atop the Hokage mountain, at sunset. The sunlight hit the buildings in a way that made the buildings glow in a swirling mass of colors that could only be explained as beautiful. Naruto smiled at her and sat down. Great, isn't it? He asked. Sarah's nodded and grabbed his hand. It truly is, she said wistfully. Naruto leaned into her. I forgot to add that the transformation made him taller, and hugged her. I know something that's even more beautiful, he said and kissed her head. Sarah smiled and laid her head on his shoulder, feeling at peace. In an unknown location 10 shadows stood in a circle in a large cave. The Kyuubi has been sighted. It seems he was transported to another world and he just came back for a visit, said one. The leader nodded. Very well Itachi, Kisame. Retrieve the Kyuubi and bring him here, said the leader turning to 2 others. They both nodded and disappeared. The leader stared up at the giant statue before him. Soon the world will have peace, it whispered. The next day Naruto was called into the Hokage's office. Naruto walked up to the door and walked in. You wanted to see me, Ba-chan, he called. Tsunade resisted the urge to yell at him. Yeah, I've got a mission for you. Naruto's eyes widened in excitement. A mission? Really? What is it? He exclaimed. Tsunade sighed. Kumo is sending a diplomat to discuss peace talks between us and them, and you were to escort her along with a Kumo Kunoichi here from the border. You leave as soon as possible, she said. Naruto bowed and left. Leaving the tower, Naruto quickly made a beeline to the hotel where he was greeted by Alucard and Walter, who were sitting on the couch playing cards. Oh Naruto, care for a game of cards? Asked Walter. Naruto smiled and shook his head. No thank you, got a mission. Do you know where my weapons are? He asked. Ah yes, they are in the chest over there, answered Walter. Naruto thanked him and walked over to the chest Walter pointed out. He opened it up and grabbed his stuff and some supplies before leaving. See ya guys, he yelled as he ran out the door. Walter waved in farewell before focusing back on his cards. He smirked and slammed them down. Beat that old friend, he shouted, only for Alucard to calmly place down a full house. Damn it. Walter is very passionate about cards. Naruto sped through the trees, enjoying the wind rushing against his face. Up ahead he could see the trees disappearing into empty plains. Dropping on the edge of the tree line, he sat down and waited. After a few hours he began to see 3 figures walking up the road towards him. One looked to be a massive, heavily built man with dark skin and pale blonde hair. He wore a standard Kumo Jonin outfit with a white headband and oval-shaped glasses. Next to him was a young blonde woman in a black and purple blouse and black pants. Around her arms and legs she wore bandages. The final member was yet another blonde woman in a very low-cut outfit with mesh underneath, a short skirt and red hand guards, high boots, and what appears to be a modified Kumo flak jacket that covers her stomach only, similar to a girdle. Naruto stood up and stretched before waving. The man of the group waved back and led the group to Naruto. You Samui's and Yugito's escort, squirt? He asked in a deep voice. Naruto nodded. Hi, I am Naruto Uzumaki, at your service, he greeted, but realized what the older man said. I'm not a squirt, he yelled. The man laughed. Relax man. Killer Bee is just a joking, isn't that right Yugito-chan? He rapped, turning to the girl next to him. Said woman just sighed. Excuse my friend here, he is just an idiot. I am Yugito and this is Samui, we're the ones you'll be escorting. She greeted. Naruto smiled and nodded. Hello, so you ready to get going? He asked. They both nodded and moved behind him. He looked to Bee and smiled. Don't worry, I'll take care of them, he said before disappearing into the forest. They continued forward until the sun was low and the sky was burning a fiery orange. Naruto stopped and turned to his 2 charges. Do you wish to rest? He asked, to which they nodded. Naruto nodded and began to set up his tent along with a small campfire. After he was finished he sat next to the fire and waited as they ate their rations. Yugito looked up from her meal and saw him not eating. Didn't you bring some food with you? She asked. Naruto nodded and pulled out a blood pack. I drink this, he said, making the 2 look at him in disgust once they realized what it was. Naruto laughed at their faces and smiled. Do not be afraid or disgusted, it is only natural for my kind, he explained before telling them of vampires. After the meal they decided to go to bed. Naruto snuggled into his tent and allowed himself to fall into blissful sleep, full of dreams of Sarah's. The next day they were halfway through the land of hot water when Naruto suddenly signaled for them to stop. Yugito looked at him questionably. What is it? She asked. Naruto eyed the area wearily. Something isn't right, he said quietly. Suddenly he jumped back, narrowly avoiding 6 shuriken. He looked up to see 2 ninjas wearing Iwa Jonin outfits glaring down at them from a nearby spike. "Look what we have here, Kane. A Konoha shinobi and some Kumo bitches," said one, a bald man with a scar running across his eye. His partner, a younger boy with black hair, laughed. "Why don't we have some fun with them, Ronin?" he said. Naruto swore and drew his katana. "You two get out of here," he yelled just as the enemy shinobi threw a volley of kunai. The group split apart, dodging the projectiles. Naruto cursed and charged forwards. The one called Kane smirked. "You go get those two, I'll take care of this twerp," he called as he drew a kunai knife. Naruto slashed in an upwards arc only for Kane to dodge and come in with a punch in Naruto's side. Naruto cursed and countered with a kick to the older man's knee. Kane cried out in pain and growled. "You brat. Take this earth style, falling earth spears," he called out. Naruto cursed and jumped up, narrowly avoiding being skewered by the spikes of earth that erupted from beneath his feet. Naruto growled and charged forward, swinging his katana in an overhead arc. Kane smirked and blocked the blow, only to have his arm nearly broken under the force of the blow. "Demon sword style. 10,000 strikes," shouted Naruto as his sword was surrounded by red chakra. Kane's eyes widened in fear as he was suddenly launched back. He spun around in the air before finally landing on the ground with a loud crash. Kane struggled to his feet and glared at Naruto. "You just got lucky, brat. Now face this fire style. Great fireball technique," he cried and sent a massive fireball towards the blonde boy. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh crap," he whispered just as he was engulfed in flame. Kane smirked and was about to walk away when he was suddenly impaled in the chest by a massive red tail. He coughed up blood as Naruto appeared in front of him in his demon form. "Sweet dreams," mocked Naruto before ripping the Iwanin apart. "Now to save the other two," he thought, and sped in their direction. Yugito swore as she dodged yet another punch from Ronin. Not long after they had left Naruto, they had entered Fire Country but were trapped by the other Iwanin and they were getting their asses kicked. She cursed yet again as she dodged yet another volley of shuriken. She glared at the enemy nin in front of her. Ronin smirked. "Give up. You can't win," he mocked. Yugito growled and threw some kunai with explosive notes attached to them. Ronin simply disappeared before reappearing behind her. "You're too slow," he taunted, kicking her into a boulder. Her head smacked against the rock and her vision went dark. Samui saw her friend go down and growled. "You bastard," she yelled, forming hand seals, lightning style. "Electromagnetic murder," she cried, sending a bolt of lightning at him. Ronin smirked and dodged the attack. "Damn it," Samui cursed, "that was the last of my chakra." Ronin chuckled. "This is it for you, you've lost," he taunted, grabbing her by the throat only for him to be knocked away by a swipe of a red tail. The last thing Samui saw was Naruto's figure standing over her protectively with 9 tails swerving back and forth behind him. Ronin looked at him and growled. "So Kane was too weak to deal with a twerp like you? Well, it doesn't matter, you're dead anyway," he shouted, charging at Naruto. Naruto smirked and disappeared. Ronin stopped and looked around wearily. Suddenly he was knocked to the side by a tackle from Naruto. Ronin growled and threw several shuriken at the blonde only for them to be deflected by Naruto's tails. Naruto smirked. "You should give up. I'm way stronger than you. Get out while you can," he yelled. Ronin just snarled and formed hand seals, earth style, earth dragon, he cried, creating a massive dragon of earth that shot towards Naruto at impossible speeds. Naruto just stood there, allowing the attack to hit him. Ronin broke out laughing. "That showed that brat to mess with Ronin Yorodon," he yelled victoriously, only to be knocked down by a punch to the face. Ronin spat out some blood and looked up to see Naruto standing over him with his eyes glowing red. Naruto smirked and shoved his katana into the man's gut. Ronin screamed out as the blade bit into his flesh. Naruto smiled cruelly as he pushed the blade deeper. "Die," he whispered before ripping the sword upwards, effectively tearing Ronin in half vertically from the chest. Naruto stood there staring at the dead Iwanin before turning to help Samui and Yugito when he suddenly felt a familiar presence. Naruto spun around and was greeted with the two people he had wished he would never seen so soon, Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki. Naruto sneered as he gazed upon the two Akatsuki members with malice. "What are you doing here?" he demanded angrily while quickly hiding his tails under his cloak. Kisame smirked. "We've come to take you in, brat. Why else?" he said cockily. Naruto grunted. Really? Well, that's too bad, 'cause I'm not going. He yelled, creating two clones and ordering them to take Yugito and Samui before facing the duo again. How about we get started? He said with a smirk. Itachi raised an eyebrow. Didn't the blonde know he was outmatched? Kisame wasn't fazed and just charged with a horizontal slash for Naruto's abdomen. Naruto quickly deflected the blow and followed with an upward slash. Kisame lazily blocked the blow before countering by slashing at Naruto's exposed left side. Naruto tried to block, but was too slow and was only able to move the attack so that he only got a deep gash. He hissed as pain ran through his body before he charged forward. They traded blows for a few moments before Kisame finally jumped back, revealing him to be covered in small cuts and gashes while Naruto bore large gashes on his arm and a nasty cut on his forehead. Kisame smirked. You're good, kid, but can you take this? He yelled, swinging Samahata in an overhead arc. Naruto jumped back to dodge, but got his cloak caught on the Samahata, making it tear from his back, revealing his tails and armor. Kisami's eyes widened as he stared at the 9 tails waving threateningly behind him. Oh crap! He whispered and jumped back just in time, avoid being skewered by the tails. Itachi watched in mild interest. It seems that you have absorbed the Kyuubi, but you probably don't contain the ability to control the chakra. Observed Itachi as he dodged a swipe from one of Naruto's tail. Naruto growled and formed some hand seals, demon arts, screaming shadow strike. He cried. Itachi's and Kisami's eyes widened in surprise as the shadows around them began to rise from the ground and merge into a massive shadow dragon that seemed to emit a loud wail before launching towards them, only for it to dissipate. Naruto mentally cursed at himself not training in the jutsus he made up or got from Kyuubi's memories. He then decided to take advantage of their attention being momentarily diverted and made a break for it, only to be stopped by the Samahata crashing down in front of him. Naruto cried out in surprise and fell on his butt. Kisame smirked before raising his sword to deal another blow when it was suddenly thrown from his hands. I would appreciate it if you left young Naruto alone, said a man's voice. Kisame turned to face the man who said it, only to met by Walter holding Samahata back with his wires and Sarah's and Kakashi pointing their weapons at him. Itachi sighed. Kisame, I believe we've overstayed our welcome, he announced, cutting Samahata free before turning to Naruto. We'll see each other shortly, Naruto-kun. With that, the two disappeared. Sarah's immediately ran to check on Naruto. Seeing his wounds, she immediately tore off some cloth from her uniform and began to wrap it around his wounds. After wrapping his wounds, Sarah slung him over her shoulder and turned to the others. Let's go, she said, and went into the forest without waiting for the others to reply. Hours later, Sarah found herself sitting in a hospital room staring at Naruto's prone form. They had arrived in the nick of time after getting a warning from the 2 Kumo nin that Naruto was engaging those 2 men that they had found him with. Sarah sighed. That was too close. Any longer and Naruto would have been toast. She was interrupted from her thoughts by groans coming from Naruto's form. She looked up to see Naruto in a sitting position holding his head in pain. Naruto, she cried happily and wrapped him in a hug. I'm so glad you're okay, she whimpered. Naruto was about to reply when she suddenly bopped him atop the head. Ow! What the hell was that for? He barked as he held his head in pain. Sarah looked at him in anger, for being reckless. She shouted. Naruto looked down. You haven't gotten used to your powers and can barely control them. Just because you're a little stronger doesn't mean you can go take on guys 10 times stronger than you, she shouted. Naruto nodded. I know, he whispered, but those guys were after me, not Samui or Yugito. I had to stay back in order to provide a distraction. It was the only way, he explained. Sarah sighed before sitting next to him. I know, but be more careful. You have someone waiting for you at home now, and I don't want to lose you, so make sure you come back every time, okay? She said in exasperation. Naruto nodded in affirmation, making her smile. Good. The nurse said you can be released this afternoon, but until then get some rest, she ordered before leaving. Tsunade looked over the blonde girl before her before sighing. So what is the Raikage asking for in exchange for this alliance? She asked. Samui reached into her pouch and pulled out a small note before handing it to Tsunade. Tsunade took it and began to read when her eyes suddenly widened in shock. She shot up and glared at the blonde in anger. How did he come across this information? She demanded. The Raikage had already been discussing the terms of the alliance with the council before your inauguration, Samui replied in a calm tone. Tsunade growled when suddenly she realized something and a mischievous smirk grew on her face. She turned to Shizune. "Get me the council," she ordered. 20 minutes later Tsunade sat in the council chambers along with the elders Danzo, Homura, and Kaharu, and the clan heads Hiyashi Hyuga, Sume Inuzuka, Shibi Aburame, Choza Akamichi, Inochi Yamanaka, and Shikakaku Nara. Everyone sat in silence as they stared at Tsunade in anticipation. Tsunade stood up and looked around the room. "Greetings, honorable council members. I've called you here to discuss a certain matter that has been brought to my attention," she announced. "It seems that you have overstepped your boundaries and been forging alliances behind my back." The council elders moved nervously in their seats. Kaharu stood up. "Tsunade, we needed to forge new alliances to make sure that the other villages don't attack us," he explained. Tsunade growled, "Don't give me that crap. If that was true, why did you need to make arranged marriages?" Shibi stood up. "It was logical. Mixing the two kunoichi with the Jinchuriki would create a generation of ninja with unimaginable chakra levels," he explained. Tsunade sneered. "And after what would you have done then, after you got your generation of strong ninja?" Danzo scoffed. "Dispose of it, of course," he said plainly. Tsunade smirked. "Really dispose of the Yandaime's heir?" she asked. Sume shot up in anger. "Impossible. Kushina's son died the night of the Kyuubi attack," she shouted. Truthfully, she always had the suspicion that Brat was her son, but to learn that she was right and she let him live such a life would be too terrible to bear, especially what Kushina's son was to her family. Tsunade nodded and threw them a small certificate. "That's his birth certificate. See for yourself," she shouted. The clan heads looked down in shame while the elders looked on in anger. "Impossible. I refuse to believe that thing is Yandaime's heir," shouted Kaharu. Sume growled. "Shut up, you insignificant cunt. Don't you dare call him that," she shouted, and the room burst into argument. Tsunade raised her hand and the room went silent. "Now that the truth has been revealed, we will proceed with the marriage, but they weds will be put under heavy guard as a new Namikaze clan. Anyone who commits an act of aggression will be immediately punished, understood?" she said. No one objected. "Good. Also, if anyone tries to do things like this behind my back, they will find themselves on the executioner's block faster than they can say, shinobi." "Dismissed," she yelled, and everyone filed out of the room until everyone was gone except Tsunade and Sume. Tsunade noticed Sume and raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" she asked. Sume bowed in respect. "Well, I came to make due on a promise that I made Kushina long ago," she said, giving Tsunade a small piece of paper. Tsunade looked it over before sighing. "Very well," she grunted before turning to Shizune. "Get me Naruto and Sarah's." Naruto stood in a clearing staring intently at the boulders before him. "Calm down and focus," he thought fiercely before speeding through some hand seals. Landing on Tora, he brought his palm up so that it was facing the rocks, demon style. "Arrow strike," he shouted, and his arm was surrounded by a red chakra that separated and formed 6 little arrows that shot forwards and struck the boulder, leaving 6 little gashes in the stone. Naruto smiled and sat down to take a breather when Tora suddenly appeared next to him. "Naruto-sama, Tsunade-sama requests your presence," said the Anbu in a monotone voice. Naruto nodded and disappeared in a poof of smoke. Naruto reappeared in front of Tsunade's office door and knocked. The doors opened, revealing Tsunade sitting with Sarah's in front of her. Naruto smiled at the Hokage. "Ba-chan, what's up?" he asked. Tsunade sighed and motioned for him to sit down, to which he complied. Tsunade stared at the two before closing her eyes in preparation for what was to come. It seems that the Honorable Council in their infinite wisdom has seen fit to arrange a marriage between Naruto and Kumo's Jinchuriki Yugito ni, along with Hana Inuzuka, Sume Inuzuka's daughter. "It seems that this was arranged by her and your mother," she said bluntly, shocking Sarah's and Naruto. Naruto shot up. "What? But I'm married to Sarah's," he yelled in anger. "How could they do this? How could his mother do this?" Tsunade looked at him in sympathy. "I know it's not what you want, but if you don't do it you'll risk insulting Kumo and ruining our chances of an alliance," she explained. Naruto looked down in defeat. Sarah's patted his back comfortingly. "How could they put this onto him?" she thought sadly. "It's just the way it is, police girl," she heard her master tell her through their mental link. She looked at Tsunade. "Anything else?" she asked. Tsunade nodded. "No, you can go." she said. Ceres nodded and led Naruto out of the room. How could they do this? He whispered in despair as they walked through the streets of Konoha. Ceres sighed, they want more power, at least the council. I have no idea why your mother did this, she said. Naruto shrugged, I have no idea why either. He sighed, it doesn't matter, I'll deal with it. As always. He whispered when he noticed two women sitting in a bar that he recognized as his future brides. He looked at Ceres. Do you want to meet your sisters? He asked. Ceres looked at him in confusion when she noticed where he was pointing. She nodded. Let's go, she shouted and dragged him inside. Hana Inuzuka was one sad trooper. First, one of her partners had become suddenly ill with an highly contagious flu and was out of action due to needing to be quarantined. Then she finds out that she was being married off to a new clan head. So here she was sitting at her favorite bar drinking her woes away. Down the bar sat a blonde woman with her hair in a ponytail wearing a Kumo headband. Slowly she walked over to sit next to the woman. Hey, what's a Kumo nin doing here? Asked Hana. The woman looked up from her drink and smiled. I've been sent here as part of the alliance between Kumo and Konoha, she said in sadness. An arranged marriage? Hana asked. The woman nodded. Hana smiled. I'm Hana Inuzuka. She greeted. The woman smiled back. Yugito ni. The woman, now identified as Yugito, greeted. Hana looked at Yugito. So do you know who you're marrying? She asked. Yugito shook her head. All I know is that he's the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, admitted Yugito. Hana looked shocked. Naruto-kun? She asked. Yugito snapped up. It's Naruto? She stuttered. Hana nodded and was about to speak more when said blonde appeared next to them with a blonde woman in a tan outfit. Hana looked at Naruto in a disapproving gaze. Naruto-kun, what are you doing here? She asked. Naruto looked up and smiled. Why, just hanging out with my fiancés, Hana-chan. He replied. Hana was about to reply when she realized his secret message. He's my fiancé. She thought in amazement. Yugito looked to Naruto and smiled. So you're to be my wed Naruto-san. A small world, is it not? She asked. Naruto laughed and nodded. Aye, it is. Who would have thought? Though I'm glad it was you too, he said excitedly, earning confused looks. Why? Asked Hana. Naruto smiled. Truth be told, I used to have a small crush on you, Hana. You were really nice to me when I was younger and see me as me, not Kyuubi. And Yugito, you are a Jinchuriki, so you understand my suffering. He explained. They both nodded. I know we may not love each other, but I hope we can learn too, he said. Hana smiled. Of course, Naruto-kun. I'm also glad it's you and not some old pervert, she said as she wrapped him in a hug. Naruto smiled. By the way, this is Ceres, my mate and master, he said. Ceres smiled and waved. Yugito looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Master? I didn't know that you were the submissive type, Naruto, she said teasingly, causing Naruto's and Ceres's faces to glow a bright red. That's N, not W, what I meant, he stuttered. Yugito and Hana both leaned in. Then what did you mean, Naruto-kun? They both asked teasingly. Well, you've heard of vampires, right? He asked. Both of them nodded. Well, she is a vampire and she turned me into one, and then I absorbed Kyuubi and became half demon, half vampire, he explained. They both looked at him in amazement when Hana suddenly glomped him. That's amazing. You are truly mate material, she shouted. Naruto looked at her in confusion. You don't hate me? Of course not, she exclaimed. To be able to absorb Kyuubi and still be yourself is incredible. Naruto smiled and wrapped her in a hug. Ceres watched the exchange with a small smile. You're growing a family, Naruto. Cherish them, she thought happily. Tsunade stared at the three women in front of her. So when is the wedding? She asked. Integra sighed. I say that we have it at Buckingham Palace in 2 months. That way we can return to my world as planned and the girls can get used to their new home early, she said clearly. Tsunade nodded and looked at the other two. Does this fit your criteria? She asked, earning nods from both women. Tsunade smiled. Excellent. I'm assuming you'll be wanting to leave right away, Integra? She asked, to which Integra nodded. Good, then I'll make preparations for a convoy as soon as possible. Let's make this a wedding that no one will forget, she exclaimed, earning shouts of approval from the other occupants in the room. Tsunade smiled as she thought about her surrogate grandson. You'll be a great husband, Naruto, she thought fondly. Meanwhile, Naruto stared at Alucard in concentration as they circled around each other with their weapons drawn. Suddenly they burst into action, Alucard shooting off 3 bullets and Naruto throwing 6 kunia. Alucard easily dodged them only to end up with a fist to the face followed by a kick to the gut. Naruto smirked. "Come on, Alucard. No holding back," he yelled as he cut off Alucard's arm. Alucard smirked and kicked the boy away. "You're strong, Naruto, but it takes a man to beat me," he said insanely. Naruto grinned and flew through hand seals, demon style, Hell Rain. He shouted and thousands of red fireballs shot from the ground and riddled the elder vampire's body with tiny burning holes. Alucard smirked insanely as he shot his guns 4 times, each bullet hitting Naruto in the chest. Naruto smirked as the bullets bounced off his armor. "Sorry, vampire. My armor is reinforced by my chakra. Your bullets don't work on me," he shouted. Alucard growled and summoned up his jackals, which charged at the blonde. Naruto laughed and dodged the hounds while effectively killing them with his katana. Off to the side sat Hana, Yugito, Ceres and Walter watching intently. They had arrived at the clearing carrying their bags while Integra spoke to Tsunade to see the two sparring. "Wow. Naruto-kun is that strong?" asked Hana. Walter nodded. "Yes, especially with his secret training technique," he said, matter-of-factually, earning confused stares. He looked at them with a smirk. "Shadow clones." Looks of understanding grew on their face as they turned back to the spar just as the two fighters broke into a hand-to-hand fight. Naruto blocked Alucard's punch and sent a kick at the man's head. Alucard ducked under the kick and swept his leg across Naruto's feet only for the blonde to jump over the attack and send a kick to Alucard's face. Alucard caught the foot with ease and pulled Naruto in, allowing him to punch the blonde in the gut. Naruto gasped in pain only to disappear in a puff of smoke. Alucard's eyes widened in shock. A shadow clone? Then where was the real one? Alucard looked around the clearing when he was suddenly sent flying into a tree by a foot to the face. Alucard was about to get up when he suddenly felt something sharp pressed against his neck. He looked up top, see Naruto standing over him with his katana held to his throat, ready to give up. He asked. Alucard smirked. "Not a chance," he growled, transforming his arm into a tendril of black energy and knocking Naruto away. Naruto tumbled back before crashing into a boulder. Naruto was about to attack when Integra suddenly appeared from the bushes along with Jiraiya. Jiraiya whistled as he saw the damaged clearing. "You didn't hold back, did you guys?" he asked. "Anyways, are you guys ready to go?" Naruto looked at them. "Is it that time already?" he asked, getting a nod from Integra. "We're needed back at Hellsing, so we're leaving now," she explained. Naruto nodded and waited for everyone to gather in a circle around the Hellsing leader. Jiraiya looked around the circle. "Everybody ready?" he asked. Integra nodded. "All right. Here we go." "Reverse summoning jutsu," he shouted before everyone was engulfed in smoke. They reappeared outside Integra's office, startling the guards posted at the door. Integra coughed as the smoke cleared before walking into her office to see a man she recognized as Captain Pip Bernadotte reading over some paperwork. The Frenchman looked up and smiled. "Ah, Lady Integra. It is good to see you. I have the utmost pleasure in announcing that there has been little vampire activity," he proclaimed, giving her the stack of papers. Integra nodded. "Thank you, Captain. You may leave." Pip bowed and left. Integra sighed as she fell into her chair before turning towards her subordinates. "We've got a lot of busy days ahead of us," she thought. "First THNGS first, Yugito's and Hana's sleeping arrangements. Since you are Naruto's fiancés, you will be sleeping in the same room. Is that acceptable?" Both girls nodded. "Good, then Naruto, Ceres, take them to your room so they can get situated. Then you can do what you wish until I need you." Everyone nodded and left, except for Walter, of course. Once the room was emptied, Integra let out a heavy sigh before turning in for the night. "Here we are," announced Ceres as she opened the door to their room. Hana and Yugito looked inside to see. "You already know how the room looks, so I'm going to skip the details." 2 single-person beds placed on either side of a large coffin. Hana looked at it in confusion. "Why is there a coffin in here?" she asked Ceres, and Naruto chuckled. "That's where we sleep. Since we're vampires, we have to sleep in a coffin to help keep our strength up when we go long periods without drinking blood," she said. The kunoichi nodded in understanding. Naruto smiled. "So why don't you guys get comfortable and we can go out for a stroll?" All right? He asked, getting nods from the girls. As soon as they were done packing, Naruto led them outside. In the forests outside of the estate, a dark figure rose up from the ground and took shape of a humanoid creature with a giant Venus flytrap popping up from the black cloak with red clouds it wore. The plant-like mandibles opened up, revealing a black and white human body. The creature raised its hand and a small ball of energy shot out of the ring it wore on its finger. The energy ball grew in size and morphed into the image of a man with dark red hair and purple eyes with black rings around the pupil. "Report," ordered the man. The plant man bowed. "The Kyuubi's hiding place has been found. He has been living in another world. It seems that he has absorbed the Kyuubi and is working as an operative of an organization bent on hunting down things called vampires," explained Zetsu. "Understood. See if you can find any way to get the Jinchuriki here," he told the plant man before disappearing. Suddenly Zetsu heard movement coming from his left. Spinning on his heel, he threw a kunai at the plant, forcing his unwanted observer jump from out of the bushes, revealing it to be a small blonde child with two black cat ears atop his head. Zetsu scowled. "Who are you and what do you want?" The boy looked at Zetsu in amazement before bowing. "I am Schrödinger, servant of Millennium and the Glorious Major. We wish to open an invitation to ally with us and gain unimaginable power in which to accomplish your goals," explained the boy. Zetsu raised an eyebrow. "What's the catch?" he asked. Schrödinger smirked. "Get rid of young Uzumaki." 2 months later, Naruto walked down the narrow corridors off the Hellsing mansion, thinking of the last 2 months. He had been spending every minute not on missions with his fiancées, taking them to dinner, movies, and romantic walks in the moonlight, and he had come to love his fiancées with a passion, but he could not shake the fear that they did not feel the same way. So here he was wandering the halls one day before the wedding, thinking on his life. He turned a corner when he was suddenly pulled into one of the rooms by 6 hands. "Hey! Let go of me!" he yelled as he was dragged into the darkness when the lights were suddenly turned on, revealing all his friends and Hellsing members looking at him with smiles. All around the room were decorations along tables stacked with food, party games, drinks. Hung from the ceiling was a huge banner with "Congrats Naruto" written in big bold letters. Naruto looked around the room in amazement. What is this?" he asked. Jiraiya laughed and slapped the blonde in the back. "Your bachelor party, of course," he bellowed. "Can't have my godson getting married without one now, can I?" Thank you." "Thank Naruto." Kiba laughed. "So how does it feel to be the first to marry?" he asked. "I don't know, weird I guess," admitted Naruto. Kiba laughed and told his friend that it would work out. The party went on for a couple hours without trouble until everyone went to bed, getting ready for the next day. The next morning, everyone sat gathered in the palace waiting for the wedding to begin. Naruto stood in his dressing room while Jiraiya and Kakashi, Naruto's chosen best man, helped him with his tux. Naruto looked at his reflection in the mirror and sighed. Kakashi seemed to see this and smiled, nervous. He asked his ex-student. Naruto nodded. "That is understandable. It's not every day you get to marry beautiful women such as Yugito, Hana, and Sarah's." Naruto nodded. "I know, it's just what if it doesn't work out? What if I mess up? I'm not exactly the smartest ninja out there," he said in despair. Kakashi chuckled. "Yes, but if these women have grown to love you, then they will learn to forgive your faults. It'll be fine, come on, it's starting," he said. 20 minutes later, Naruto stood atop the altar with Kakashi next to him, along with Neji, Walter, Lee, Shikamaru, and Choji. Suddenly an organ began to play a traditional wedding tune and the doors opened, revealing Moegi in a pink dress holding a basket of flowers, while Konohamaru walked behind her carrying a pillow with 4 golden rings placed atop it. Behind him walked Sakura, Ino, Samui, and Tenten, all in hot pink dresses, and finally came 3 figures in cloud white, each led by either a man Naruto recognized as the Raikage, Sume, Inzuka, and Alucard. Naruto smiled as he saw the white figures approach the altar and stepped down to greet the men. Slowly he reached out his hand and shook each of the men, and one woman, listening to their silent threats of pain if he treated his brides wrong. With a firm nod of understanding, he took each of the figures' hand and led them to the altar. The minister looked up. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered together here in the sight of God, and in the face of this company, to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony, which is an honorable estate, instituted of God, signifying unto us the mystical union that is betwixt Christ and his church. which holy estate Christ adorned and beautified with his presence and first miracle that he wrought in Cana of Galilee, and is commended of St. Paul to be honorable among all men. And therefore is not by any to be entered into unadvisedly or lightly, but reverently, discreetly, advisedly, soberly, and in the fear of God. Into this holy estate these two persons present come now to be joined. If any man can show just cause, why they may not lawfully be joined together, let him now speak, or else hereafter forever hold his peace. I require and charge you both, as ye will answer at the dreadful day of judgment when the secrets of all hearts shall be disclosed, that if either of you know any impediment, why ye may not be lawfully joined together in matrimony, ye do now confess it. For be ye well assured, that if any persons are joined together other than as God's word doth allow, their marriage is not lawful. Wilt thou have these women to thy wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love her, comfort her, honor, and keep her in sickness and in health? And, forsaking all others, keep thee only unto her, so long as ye both shall live? Naruto looked through the veils of the three dresses and smiled, I do. The minister turned to the women. Yugito, Saras, and Hana, wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love him, comfort him, honor, and keep him in sickness and in health? And, forsaking all others, keep thee only unto him, so long as ye both shall live? I do. They chorused. Naruto smiled and took 3 of the rings and took the women's hand. With that they pronounced their vows. After they finished the minister smiled to them, then I pronounce you man and wives. You may kiss the bride. With that Naruto lifted the veils and kissed his new brides while the audience applauded. After the ceremony servants filed into the room and pulled out tables and food. Soon Naruto was sitting at a large table with his newest wives on either side while Saras sat on the other side of Hana. All around them the wedding guests mingled and conversed. On either side of him sat his new wives, except Saras, who didn't really count since she was kinda already his wife. Suddenly Kakashi stood up. Attention! Can I have everyone's attention? He called as the conversation ceased and everyone turned to face the one-eyed ninja. Kakashi I smiled. I would like to say a few words, he announced, turning to Naruto. Hello everybody, my name is Kakashi Hitaki and I was Naruto's genin sensei. Now first, on behalf of the brides and groom, I would like to thank you all for coming on this special day for Hana, Yugito, Saras, and Naruto, and I would also like to thank you for the wonderful wedding gifts. Also thank you to Lady Tsunade, Lord Raikage, and Sir Hellsing for setting up this wonderful party. Naruto grew up in poverty in our village. He was a hated child, beaten, abused, and shunned. But he did not let that stop him from becoming a ninja to protect the village. Now I'm sure you're wondering why. Why would he want to protect the very people who tried to harm him? I'll tell you why. Because he wanted to be better. He wanted to show them not through hurting them but by protecting them. By protecting them he was proving that he was no demon or monster, but a boy who wanted to be acknowledged as a human. So Naruto trained and trained, failing the academy 3 times, but graduating when he stopped a traitor from stealing our village's most dangerous secrets. So I got him as a genin. He was brash, idiotic, hyper, and a brat. I am ashamed to say that I chalked him out as a failure and didn't try to teach him, missing out on the growth of what he is now. A year later here he is a proud chunin, a husband, and a true friend to those he cares about. Now I know nothing about Yugito except that she is a great ninja, but Hana is just like her mother, brash, tough, yet wise and kind to her allies. Now Saras, I only met her for a couple days, but could see that she was a good woman and an excellent match for Naruto. So here's to a healthy and happy relationship, you 3. He finished raising his glass, followed by everyone in the audience. Just as they were about to continue with the festivities, the doors were blasted open, smoke spilling into the room. Ninjas got ready for battle, grabbing anything that could be used as weapons. Suddenly from the cloud burst men in black military uniforms with red clouds on the chest. Naruto's eyes widened before jumping from his seat, his hands blurring through hand seals. Wind style, wind blade. He cried, swinging his arm in an horizontal arc, sending a wave of razor-sharp wind shooting towards 2 of the attackers. The unknown attackers dodged the attack before pulling out long curved swords and slashing at Naruto. Said blonde quickly jumped back and kicked one in the face before ducking under the other's next strike and punching his gut. Naruto jumped back only to lunge forward, driving his claws into the closest one. burying his fingers into its chest. The attacker screamed out in pain before disintegrating. Naruto stared at the fallen pile of ash in amazement only to be knocked back by a kick to the face. Naruto flew through the air and crashed into a nearby table. Naruto spit out some blood as he stared at the second attacker. Lucky shot. Demon style. Shadow Kraken. He cried. Suddenly 6 tentacles rose from the man's shadow and wrapped around the foolish attacker before dragging the screaming man into a gaping beak of a massive creature made from his shadow. Naruto watched as the man was swallowed up by his own shadow before looking around and saw Kakashi fighting off 3 foes at once. Naruto flashed through some hand seals and cried, "Wind style. Great breakthrough." He sucked in a mouthful of air and breathed out, summoning a whirlwind barreling into 2 of Kakashi's assailants and distracting the third one long enough for Kakashi to stab him in the neck. Suddenly the man looked at Kakashi with a sadistic smirk. "That hurt," he taunted, making Naruto's eyes widen. "Everyone stab them in the heart or the head. They're vampires, so just stabbing their necks won't kill them," he yelled as he stabbed his tail into the man's chest. Kakashi looked up and saw Naruto standing there with his hand held out to help him up. "Thanks," said Kakashi. Naruto chuckled. "No time for thanks, we've got some scum to kill." "I know, glorious, isn't it?" said a voice. They turned to see Alucard and Walter standing next to them armed with their weapons. Naruto laughed. "Yes, it is, Master Alucard. It is," he yelled, beheading yet another vampire when he was suddenly kicked to the ground. Looking up, he saw 3 of the enemy vampires standing over him with their weapons raised to deal the final blows. Naruto tensed and got ready for the imminent pain, when the vampire's head suddenly exploded. Naruto looked up and saw his fiancés looking extremely pissed, with Sarah's holding a smoking Harkonnen while Hana and Yugito held pistols obviously filled with silver ammunition. "You bastards," whispered Hana. "Ruined," mumbled Yugito. Growled Sarah's. Naruto groaned in fear. "Shit, they're mad." "Wedding," they each roared before letting loose all hell upon the enemy with their weapons while laughing insanely. "Don't ever ruin something like a vampiress's or a kunoichi's wedding," mumbled Alucard sagely as they heard the girls continue their slaughter. The men present all nodded in fearful agreement while the women shared happy smiles just as they heard a bunch of girly man screams. Integra, Tsunade, Gaara, and the Raikage, sat in Integra's office while Jiraiya and Walter stood off to the side. It had been only 3 hours since the attack and they had already gotten some troubling news concerning the attackers. "So you're saying they were AIM shinobi?" shouted in disbelief. Integra nodded sadly. "Yes, this is an AIM headband, is it not?" she asked, giving him the headband with the rain symbol carved into it. Tsunade shook her head. "This is not good. This means that Akatsuki has vampires on their side. A whole village maybe," she whispered, getting a nod from Integra. "There are also rumors of true vampires joining Millennium. This makes it imperative that Hellsing makes a sufficient standing in your world as well as ours to oppose this threat. That is why I am sending Naruto as a commander of the new Hellsing," she explained. "Excellent, we will start sending some ninjas here to help you here," said A. "This is troubling that these 2 forces have come together. The future is dark indeed," muttered Gaara, getting nods from his fellow leaders. Naruto was in his room lying on his new coffin bed that Jiraiya had gotten him as a wedding gift. In his arms he held each of his new wives as they cuddled. "I'm lucky to have you guys," he said to them, planting a kiss on each of their heads. Sarah smiled at him. "And us you," she said, "but there is something we would like to ask you." Naruto looked at her. "Yes. How would you like one more wife?" she asked. Naruto looked up. "Depends. Are they just looking for power? Do they care for me?" he asked. Hana nodded. "Who are they?" "Temari." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "But isn't she already going out with Shikamaru?" he asked. Hana shook her head. "Temari broke up with Shikamaru a month ago. So she's free and has had an eye for you because she admires you and likes you, especially after how much you've done for her brother," she explained. Naruto nodded. "I'll take her on some dates and see how it goes from there," he told them. Suddenly the door opened, revealing Integra followed by the cages. "Lady Integra, what is it?" Naruto asked, sitting up. "It seems the enemy is getting bolder and has teamed up with your Akatsuki and are laying siege on your world. As is Hellsing's mission, we must destroy this threat to the crown and her allies immediately. I'm sending you as the new commander of the new Hellsing base we shall be setting up in Konoha. There you will then aid in the war against the new vampire Akatsuki and Millennium. Once all enemy forces are destroyed, come back and I will issue new orders. From now on the 3 cages are your commanding officers and you will do as they say. Understood. Naruto nodded. Integra smiled and patted his shoulder. Get packed, Commander. She ordered. You leave in 3 hours. Good luck. Naruto stood in front of a large Japanese-style gate to the new Hellsing compound. Next to him stood his new wives, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and 50 volunteers from England. Naruto sighed and walked up to the gate. Drawing some blood from his thumb, he ran it across the gate seal. There were sounds of gears and the doors slid open, revealing a wide stone path leading to a large mansion that you could barely see over the giant trees that littered the yard. Naruto smiled and looked to his companions. It's perfect, he exclaimed. Tsunade smiled. I'm glad you like it, Naruto, she said as they walked through the entrance into a massive chamber with a marble staircase. On the first floor is the training room, kitchen, dining room, guest rooms, and storage rooms. On the second is the sleeping quarters for the soldiers, armory, and infirmary. On the third is the main living quarters for the head family, along with a library, office, and conference room. There also is a garden in back, explained Jiraiya with pride. Naruto smiled. It's perfect, thank you, he said before turning to his men. All right boys, listen up. From now on you represent Hellsing, the Queen, and Konoha. So you will behave like civilized adults and listen to all orders given to you by either me or the Hokage. You already have your posts, so go get settled and then get there, he yelled. The volunteers jumped into salute. ORAA. They chanted and ran about the mansion. Naruto smiled and led his wives up to their new home. Naruto sat at his desk reading over the reports on Akatsuki activities when he suddenly felt a pair of arms wrap around his chest. He looked up and nearly fainted at what he saw. Standing there were Sarah's, Hana, and Yugito, each wearing black undergarments that seemed to make their curves much more pronounced. Naruto swallowed nervously as he could feel his little buddies starting to gain firmness. What's going on?" he asked. "Well, we were sad that we never got to consummate our marriage in a honeymoon, so," said Sarah's, rubbing his chest. "We decided that we don't want to wait to take our Naruto," finished Hana and Yugito as they each kissed his cheek. Naruto sat silent as he gazed intently at the ghouls-infested town from his perch on a random tree branch. "It seems that the town has fallen," he whispered angrily before turning to the man next to him. "Do you see the primary target?" he demanded. The man nodded. "Affirmative, about 30 clicks, sir," he answered, pointing to an open stand where a man in a gray cloak sat drinking the blood of a young woman. "Good job, Commander," ordered Naruto. "As soon as I give the signal, I want you and your men to give me and Sarah's cover fire while we move in and eliminate the target. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Excellent," exclaimed Naruto before raising his hand. "In 3, 2, 1 now," he yelled and dashed forward with Sarah's following while the men let loose a hail of bullets. Far off, Naruto could see their target stand up and begin yelling to his ghouls. 5 seconds later, he jumped back just in time to avoid being hit by a volley of shuriken. He looked up to see 6 men in black robe wearing brown face masks descending from the sky. "Shit!" he cursed as he dodged a sword strike from one. "Who the hell are you people?" he yelled as he kicked the ninja in the face. He ducked under another sword swipe and elbowed his attacker before slicing off the arm of another. He turned around to see 3 of them charging towards him. Naruto quickly flashed through some hand seals and yelled, "Demon style! Shearing wave!" He swung his sword horizontally, sending a massive wave of energy that sliced through them like they were butter. He looked to where Sarah's was to see her battling the enemy vampire in a fistfight, that she was winning, judging by how her opponent was all bloody while she wasn't. Naruto smirked as he sidestepped away from one of his attacker's water dragons before crushing them with his tails. "Hey Sarah's, just kill him so we can get out of here," he yelled. Sarah's smirked and nodded. The man smirked cockily. "Ha! Like you could kill me? This isn't even half my true power," he yelled before forming a tiger seal. "Final burial. Hell's inferno," he cried before he and Sarah's were suddenly swallowed by a giant fireball. Naruto's eyes widened in fear. Sarah's. Tsunade sat at her desk working on paperwork. She felt something in the air. She looked up and thought one thing, Naruto. "Get me Kakashi and Team Guy," she yelled. "Sarah's," cried Naruto. Time seemed to slow as the dust settled, revealing the enemy vampire standing over an unconscious Sarah's. Her left arm was missing and she had multiple cuts and gashes. "Gasp! Hey, That'll teach ya bitch gasp now to finish ya off, but first I think I'll have a little fun, muttered the vampire as he moved to unzip his pants only to freeze as he felt a massive wave of killing intent coming from somewhere on the side. He turned to see Naruto glaring at him with pure red eyes filled with hate, his tails waving menacingly behind him. "Don't you dare touch her!" screamed Naruto as he charged forwards only for more ninja in brown masks to appear in his path, weapons held ready. Naruto snarled and held out his hands. Focusing some of his demon chakra into his palms, he formed two red Rasengan that seemed to have hundreds of tiny sharpened chakra spikes. Demon Rasengan. Ripping Vortex. He yelled and shoved them both into the closest foe's torso, ripping a gaping hole before he knocked back two others with a chakra-enforced kick. The vampire cursed and went through some seals, stopping at bird. Blood style. 10,000 birds of hell. He cried as blood seemed to rise up from the dead and form tiny red crows before shooting towards our blonde hero. Naruto ripped his sword from the body of the last masked nin only to see the hail of red birds shooting towards him. Interesting jutsu, he thought before he moved his tails to swat at the birds, making them splatter on the ground. Naruto smirked. My turn. Wind release. Spiraling wind ball. He yelled, blowing a ball of wind chakra at the vampire. The ball smashed into the vampire's face, sending him flying into a building. He groaned in pain as he tried to stand up but stopped when he was suddenly forced back down by a punch by Naruto, who followed by ripping off his head. Naruto stood silently glaring at the body as it slowly disappeared into black flames before turning and walking towards Saras's fallen body. Naruto fell to his knees and stared at her unconscious form in sadness. Why won't you wake up? He thought. Come on, wake up. You aren't dead, not now, he thought desperately as he cradled her to his chest. For the first time in his life he felt it. Like a cold rain it washed over him, enveloping him in its freezing embrace, despair. The skies above Konoha were dark and cloudy, rain fell in a solemn downfall. Naruto sat in a small chair staring at Saras's prone form as she lay completely still on a hospital bed. It had been 3 days since they had returned from the fight with the enemy and Saras still had yet to wake up from her coma. This is my fault, Naruto thought angrily. Why hadn't he watched her back more? Damn it. It should have been there to protect her. He reached out to take her hand, held it tightly, reviling in her cool touch. Feels kinda weird thinking about this. 'Cause it usually is bad. He then ran his hand through her hair. He sat there for a few moments until he finally stood up and walked towards the door. He stopped and gave Saras one last look before walking out of the room. Saras, I swear I will end this war, he swore to himself. From now on he would train like crazy so that he could protect his precious people. When Naruto arrived in his living quarters, he found Hana and Yugito sitting on the couch. They looked up at him with worried faces. How's Saras? Asked Hana. Naruto sighed, and sat down between them. She's still in the coma. We don't know if she'll wake up anytime soon, he said. They both looked down in sadness at their friend's condition. So what do we do? Asked Yugito. We continue fighting the good fight. We train till our fingers bleed, our hearts give her out, until we put ourselves into a fucking coma. Then we go and rip them fucking apart. He growled, his eyes turning red in anger. Both females nodded their agreement. He calmed down and smiled. But we can't let this blind us. We fight not for revenge but to protect the elemental nations. Saras will want us to remember that. They nodded, both noticing he didn't say would have meaning he hadn't given up on her, and hugged him tightly. Naruto returned the hug with fervor. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Naruto let out a growl and got up from his couch. What do you want? Naruto asked in annoyance as he opened the door, revealing a man Naruto recognized as Commander Charles Grant. The commander saluted. Sir. We've just received word from the Hokage that a large enemy force is making its towards Cha no Kuni. How many? About 500, all vampires, led by an unknown tall woman with black hair. Naruto let out a curse. Assemble the men and request some support from the Hokage. We move out immediately. The commander saluted and walked out. Naruto sighed and turned to his other two wives. Saras is going to have to wait, I need to go to work. He turned to leave when he was stopped by a hand grabbing his shoulder. He turned to see Hana and Yugito smiling at him. Naruto, we're coming too, said Hana with a sad smile. Naruto's eyes widened before narrowing. No, you could get. He was stopped by a hand covering his mouth. "We know the risks, and we don't care," stated Yugito sternly. "We want to make sure that you come back in one piece along with getting some payback for what happened to Ceres." "Bu. No buts, we're coming with and that's final." Naruto growled, knowing that they wouldn't take no for an answer. He let out a nod. 30 minutes later they stood outside the gate along with about 50 Hellsing Marines and Konoha ninja. Naruto looked around at assembled group with determination. At his sides stood Hana and Yugito dressed in battle armor. Next to Hana were her dogs. Naruto took a deep breath and shouted, "All right everyone, there is an enemy force making their way towards the land of tea, and we're going to stop them in their tracks. We are outnumbered, but I am confident in our abilities and in our chances of winning. You all signed on to protect this world from Millennium and the Akatsuki, so let's give 'em hell, shall we?" he exclaimed in a commanding tone. "Hora!" came the group's collective shout. Naruto nodded. "Good, now let's move out," he ordered before he and the rest of the ninjas disappeared into the trees while the Marine drove in massive troop carriers. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.